Denver is about to get civilians involved in its controversial method of breaking up homeless camps.
It feels like a way to basically kind of deputize civilians to enforce the urban camping ban.
Tracking COVID cases after a concert in a relatively unvaccinated part of Colorado. The trickiness posed to everyone from police to people in grocery stores in one particular spot where two cities and a county meet. The weather people in town for the All-Star game who have no say in whether or not a storm will delay tonight's game. And Denver City Council gets blindsided by a move from within to change who represents who in this city.
What is happening here? Is there a proposal coming to this body, and if so, when?
There's a proposal coming. Your body should stick around for next. Denver's sustained campaign to break up homeless camps has been controversial. It's been challenged in court, and now it is partially headed into the hands of civilians. A new street enforcement team. Our Mark Salinger heard the city's reasoning and critics' concerns.
The city of Denver is hiring. They're looking for 6 people for a new street enforcement team. Depending on who you ask, it's either a step towards solving homelessness or a step towards making it far worse.
I hope we see that our residents can see and our business owners can see a positive effect from this.
This is not a solution. This is a way of increasing mass homelessness in our city.
Armando Saldate III is the Assistant Deputy Director for the Denver Department of Public Safety. Ana Cornelius is with the advocacy group Denver Homeless Out Loud.
It is a disaster waiting to happen.
There is a lot of frustration of the lack of enforcement of the urban camping ordinance.
The new pilot program gives a small group of civilians the power to issue citations to people disobeying a handful of city ordinances, first reported by the Denver Voice. Think of camping on city streets, smoking weed in public, trespassing, or being in a park after curfew. The team would be unarmed and not dressed as police officers, just wearing a shirt with the city logo. Saldate admits this is a step towards enforcing laws that are often broken by those experiencing homelessness.
There's a big outcry from our community to do something else, right? And we know that outreach isn't enough. We're out there all the time and we can't reach every encampment there is.
It feels like a way to basically kind of deputize civilians to enforce the urban camping ban and other, policies around homelessness and public safety.
Vinny Cervantes is with the homeless advocacy group Denver Alliance for Street Health Response. The group helped support the creation of the STAR program over the past years, a van that responds to nonviolent 911 calls with a paramedic and mental health professional. He says this new program would punish homelessness rather than offering help like STAR.
Without a cop enforcing these kind of policies, that people are going to question where it's coming from and what authority they have. And I think it will lead directly to escalation. I think there's a lot of people that would say, why are you giving me a ticket?
Both the city and advocacy groups agree that finding permanent housing options is the ultimate solution for homelessness. While the city says the problem has gotten to a point where enforcement is needed, advocacy groups say giving people fines could lead up to problems starting to pile up, Kyle, things like court dates, more fines, even warrants, which ultimately they say leads it to being even harder to find permanent housing solutions.
You start out by saying the city's hiring. Hiring whom?
Yeah, so all you need at this point is a GED, at least that's what it says on there, and they say that they would like you to have some experience talking to people, things like that, but you don't need any mental health experience, any crisis intervention experience. They say that they'll train for that in the first weeks before they start sending out the crews out onto the streets.
You hear the advocates talk about how one of their concerns about policing in the city, not just related to issues around homelessness, but in general, is the idea of, is a police officer the best responder in every situation? So I might think that advocates might prefer a softer approach from a civilian versus a law enforcement officer, but you didn't get that impression.
So both of the advocacy groups that I talked to today, they're in favor of the STAR program type of thing that's going on right now. But what they also see is that with a police officer, if you have a problem, you can go to the police department and there's a chain of command where that goes through. With a civilian, they worry that that's not going to be able to happen.
Full disclosure, STAR program, Next Viewer supported it through the Word of Thanks program, sends mental health responders to some crisis calls. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. I-70 through Glenwood Canyon is back open, just reopened about 15 minutes ago. This was a relatively short shutdown today over flash flooding concerns and the chances that a mudslide could bury the road. 6th closure of the interstate in less than a month, and you know that we are in for a summer's worth of this inconvenience. Pair of mudslides at the end of June sent mud and debris from the Grizzly Creek burn scar down onto the highway. and I-70 has been closed through Canyon a handful of times since because they don't want vehicles down there if the earth comes through once more. Tens of thousands of baseball fans, shoulder to shoulder, in and around Coors Field over the last couple of days for the All-Star Game, swapping stories about their favorite sport and likely swapping respiratory droplets. Now, math tells us that some of those folks are unvaccinated, so some of them will contract COVID. Science tells us most of those COVID cases will not be severe. Some will be. Mesa County may serve as a guide for what's to come. That county on the Western Slope hosted the Country Jam Music Festival a bit more than 2 weeks ago. They've since been tracking a small outbreak of COVID-19 that they believe is tied back to the festival. It's 27 positive cases. You figure positive cases that were also serious enough to send somebody in for a test and then a report. The people are from 10 different counties across the state. Most of those cases are concentrated in Mesa County. Again, we're talking 27 cases out of the approximately 25,000 people who went to the show.
I always multiply what we know by 4. So, in line with any other outbreak that we've had, because we've had outbreaks larger than that. We've had, churches, bowling alleys, various other facilities, larger than the 27 that we currently know about. So, I would assume there are some cases out there, but it wasn't widespread. We knew going into it, there was some risk, but we also were very aware of the outdoor guidance by the CDC and by the state.
County's Executive Director of Public Health, Jeff Kaur, says they followed the CDC guidelines about risk at outdoor events when they decided to proceed with the festival. And he says, in his view, it comes down to communication, that anybody who's going to go out to a country show or to a baseball game just needs to be told about the risk so they can balance it against their vaccine status and their own health situations. Meteorologists from the National Weather Service are in town this week for the same reason that a lot of people are, the All-Star Game. And with thunderstorms this evening, they are also here to be the eyes in the sky for everybody who's down in Lodo, except for the tens of thousands of fans who are currently sitting inside Coors Field right now. The NWS meteorologists have no control over whether the baseball game is played if there's a weather risk. The National Weather Service office in Boulder sent some meteorologists down to Denver's Emergency Operations Center. Their main job is to try and keep crowds in the streets safe if bad weather moves in. Their jurisdiction and authority ends at the Coors Field gates.
We are here to support the public safety side of things, right? We don't do forecasts for Coors Field in the Rockies. They have their own support for that. Taxpayers don't pay for us to provide support to a private enterprise, right? So we're all about public safety.
So who ultimately does control the weather delays in that scenario? Whether it's a delay, cancellation, could you imagine an All-Star game not being played? So the Rockies rely on a private meteorology group called Skyview Weather. They're based out of Castle Rock. Usually they don't start to worry about lightning until it's within 8 miles of the stadium. Even once lightning comes within that 8-mile cordon, there's not an automatic delay. Whether it's lightning or it's heavy rain, after the Rockies get advice from the private company, the decision comes down to a group. There's the Coors Field grounds crew, the operations staff, Major League Baseball, and the umpires. Fans coming out to tonight's All-Star Game seem a far bit tidier than the crew that left e-bikes and scooters in a heap outside Coors last night for the Home Run Derby. Either that, or somebody with the city or Lime or Lyft did not like the fact that we showed you that picture of Mount Scooter last night, because look at them tonight. They're in these pristine little rows like a marching army, looking good on Denver's big night in the spotlight. So this city has added a lot more people in the last few decades without adding more representatives for those people on city council. So as a result, you got each city council member representing more and more citizens. And then you got the 2 at-large members who represent everyone. And man, it got feisty today when a city council member suggested out of the blue that they add new districts by doing away with the at-large seats. There are 11 seats currently. So there are just under 67,000 constituents per district. It's the largest that those council districts have ever been. If you were to add 2 seats, draw new lines, then each city council member would answer to 56,000 people. When Councilman Chris Herndon pitched this idea in committee today, he had to answer to at-large Councilwoman Robin Kniech, who wanted to defend the value of what she does as an at-large rep. Also, it appears that she did not get a courtesy heads up from her colleague that he planned to have her lose her seat in a game of musical chairs.
Right now, every resident of this city who's eligible to vote gets to vote for 3 council members. A proposal to eliminate the at-large seats would remove 2 of their votes, so they would lose 2 of the votes they have for members of this body. They are not in this conversation. No public comment was posted for this conversation. It wasn't even named, discussion about changing the at-large seats. So I do have to ask, with 7 weeks left until the charter, does someone have a date held to bring this to committee? Is there a bill coming? Because the community deserves to know that.
Yeah, because voters would need to approve any change to representation on Denver City Council. It looks like there is something coming. Councilwoman Candy C. DeBaca says she'd like to bring a proposal forward in the next 7 weeks.
When you get to the corner there at Wadsworth and Bellevue, there are actually 3 jurisdictions.
Seems simple enough. It's actually quite complicated, whether it's police investigating a car crash or you figuring out if you have to pay a bag fee at the grocery store. Just how much of a minority are minority owners in Colorado's cannabis industry? You wanted more in-depth information after we touched on this last night. You ask, we answer. Next.
Our next question comes from the person who does my hair. All right, get your jokes out of the way now. Jennifer wanted to know why she had to pay the Denver bag fee at this Walmart at Wadsworth and Quincy when it's got a Littleton mailing address.
First of all, can I express great surprise that you actually have someone to does your hair? You got to be joking.
Well, he said what you were thinking. Denver City Councilman Kevin Flynn lives in a patriotic cul-de-sac. It's in Denver, which you wouldn't necessarily know when you pass the Lakewood sign on the way to his house.
I think I'm the only member of Denver City Council who, when I leave council meetings to come home, I have to leave the city limits to get home. I can't get here without leaving Denver and passing it through a little bit of Lakewood.
This is as much a geography story as it is civics. You have to pay the Denver bag fee at this Littleton-addressed Walmart because it's in Denver.
The U.S. Postal Service doesn't care what city you're in. They just care what zip code you're in. So this is 80123, which is out of the Littleton post office. But we're nowhere near the city of Littleton.
There is similar confusion at the corner of Bellevue and Wadsworth. The Whole Foods with the parking lot reminder to remember your reusable bag is not in Denver and does not charge the Denver bag fee. Across the street at the TJ Maxx with the Littleton mailing address, it's Denver and charges the bag fee.
When you get to the corner there at Wadsworth and Bellevue, there are actually 3 jurisdictions. There's Denver on the northwest corner, unincorporated Jefferson County on the northeast corner, and Lakewood on the south half of that intersection.
Let's just say don't get into a car accident in the middle of this intersection. This was not always Denver. Watch the outline of the city as it has grown. The southwest part of Denver was annexed decades ago, which explains the bag fee and the Denver fire station nearby.
They had annexed clear to the hogback. My council district would have gone almost all the way to Red Rocks, outside of Morrison, if those annexations had held up. But Jefferson County sued in court over these annexations. This is actually the last annexation in Denver that held up in court, that wasn't given back to Jefferson County.
On the far northeast side of Denver, there was an annexation for DIA. There's an amendment in place in the Colorado Constitution now that requires the vote of the people in that county, Adams County in that case, to approve it, which they did. If you're ever curious, whether it's for a bag fee or whatever else, look toward the street sign. In Denver, there's that little cutout above the street sign, sometimes below it, with the 100 block that indicates it's a Denver street sign. And in Lakewood, there are blue signs, and on the far left side, Kyle, there's the Lakewood logo.
You know, Marcia, so you grew up here. I did not. Especially on the outer edges of Denver, I find with some frequency, I think to myself, where am I? And you got to look around, and first thing I always go to is color of the street signs.
Color of the street sign, the logo on the street sign, although where I was, where that in between the Whole Foods and the TJ Maxx, there is a City of Lakewood sign. It doesn't say like welcome to the City of Lakewood. It just talks about street maintenance, and that would have indicated to me I'm in Lakewood. And then when you take a right turn into that TJ Maxx parking lot, I would still think I'm in Lakewood. Lo and behold, I'm not. And as a Littleton mailing address, you've passed a Lakewood sign and you're in the city of Denver.
Confusion abounds. Marshall Zellinger sorting things out nightly on Next. Thank you, sir. A discouraging statistic about Colorado's marijuana industry had you asking for more about who owns what. So let's lay it all out. And we're finally close to a resolution in a Colorado case that involved a bonkers conspiracy theory that swept America, then just kind of vanished. Next. The Coloradan who drew our attention to QAnon before that conspiracy theory was widely discussed is headed on trial for a child kidnapping plot last month. Cynthia Absug was actually in court today. Absug is accused of plotting an armed raid with fellow QAnon believers to try and kidnap her son out of the foster care system. She was arrested in December of 2019 in Montana, Warren out of Colorado. She's pleaded not guilty to second-degree kidnapping. Her trial is scheduled to begin August 2nd in Douglas County. The QAnon conspiracy theory kind of faded out with the end of the Trump presidency. There were QAnon believers who held out hope all the way up to President Biden's inauguration day. President Trump was going to swoop in and arrest all the Democrats, execute a bunch of them for killing children and drinking their blood. It was exciting stuff. Elected Republicans from Parker Mayor Jeff Toborg to Congresswoman Lauren Boebert have since abandoned their previous support for the QAnon conspiracy theory.
Smoke and haze again this afternoon with an ozone alert issued throughout the evening and for part of the day tomorrow. But we have a weak front moving in from the north and will bring temperatures down. Mid-80s this afternoon here, triple-digit highs down south and close to 100 in Grand Junction. With this front coming in, there's a better chance of showers and thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. The storms that are rolling off the foothills tonight, moving from the northwest to the southeast, actually helping to improve the air quality around the area, scouring out some of the bad air. About this time tomorrow night, we could see some slow-moving storms that could drop some heavy rain in the city. Tonight, mostly cloudy, a stray storm early, then some clearing, our low 62. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, about a 60% chance of rain from thunderstorms with cooler highs in the lower 80s. And then with sunshine, low 90s for Friday and for next weekend.
We are getting some feedback tonight with a question about who owns marijuana businesses in our state. Cannabis entrepreneur and social justice advocate Wanda James was on last night discussing her concern over the lack of black-owned dispensaries in Colorado. Just 3 of them, James said. Next viewer Eric wrote in asking if we might also share the number of Latino and Hispanic-owned dispensaries in our state. That is a great question, Eric. So when we started to look into this, state regulators track representation across all types of cannabis-owned businesses, dispensaries, grow operations, so forth. So less than half of those cannabis businesses are actually dispensaries. Of the 1,500 some cannabis businesses where the owners chose to disclose this information, 38 said that they are black-owned, 111 owners are Latino and Hispanic, and there were 88 other minority owners in the business. We're back with your feedback in just a moment. Marshall touched on the real-life implications about the confusion with jurisdictions in southwest Denver, and Roseanne wrote in to say, regarding the overlapping jurisdictions at Bellevue and Wadsworth, she said, we live in the neighborhood behind the Lilton Whole Foods. Roseanne said that when her husband had a seizure last year, took 5 calls to 911 to get the right responders. She said fortunately it didn't adversely impact his outcome, but she said it was an added stress for the family at the time. As we said, something as trivial as bag fees or something as serious as what happened to Roseanne's family. See you next time.